Hey, and welcome back to Torah and Psychology. Today's topic is really a favorite of mine because for any religious Jew or just devout human, there is this one particular topic that is this one midah quality that is so praiseworthy in our tradition, and it plays a part of our weekly lives or even our daily lives. It changes people's lives. It destroys people's lives, God forbid. And so first we're going to dive into the mitzvah, understand the sources, understand what it's about, and then have a little bit of a curveball and a new take on how to look at this mitzvah, and then look at your own psychology, and then see how to balance the two to see if you're in line with yourself and your needs, or perhaps if maybe through this mitzvah you are deceiving yourself and denying yourself. I don't know. Let's see. So the mitzvah is, drumroll please, ta-da! Hachnasat orchim, or hospitality. Hachnasa means to bring in, orchim means guests, from the Hebrew word oreach. And just to start us off with a boom, I'll tell you one of my favorite Torahs that I've ever learned. I learned in Bat Ayin by the name of the Rabbi Harav Avraham Iskowitz, who learned it out from the Ramchal, that the word in Hebrew for guest, as we said, is oreach. I don't know if that's backwards or not, but use your special powers of dyslexia if it is. And he mentions that the word oreach is a composition. It's two words together. And that is, can you guess, what is oreach made out of? Think about it. So it's or, chet. Okay, so or means light, and chet is the Hebrew representation for the idea of that which is beyond. So an oreach is technically the light of the beyond, the light of the infinite, right? Chet in Hebrew is 8. And as we know that if you draw an 8 and you put it on its side, you literally get the number for infinity, because what happens when you bring a guest into your home, you literally bring in the light of the infinite. Now, that's really cool. And I can tell you, I have definitely experienced that. As a person who, for about the last 10 years, was, let's say, a mega host, I think that I dedicated most of my life to hosting Shabbatot, hosting every holy event that you could think of, Yom HaAtzmaut, engagements, yahrzeits, farbrengens, yeshiva students, seminary girls, meditation evenings, you name it, I hosted it. And that's why I'm really quite the valid speaker for this topic, because I have dedicated so much of my life, so much of my finances, and so much of my energy. And wow, there were miracle stories. I mean, at one point I was living in the old city of Jerusalem. And so what I would do is I would invite a certain amount of people, and then I would set the table as full as I could. And I would tell my partner at the time, you can bring home X many guests from the kotel. So on any given night, he could just show up with 10 to 13, 14 extra people who we did not know at all. They were Jewish, they were Arab, they were Muslim, they were tourists, they were from every which country you could imagine. They were religious, they were not. And so the blend and the energy of what happened was often spectacular. In fact, I recently met a young couple, and he says to me, I know you, but you don't know me. And I said, what do you mean? He's like, I was in your house. And I'm like, oh, yeah, sorry. I had a lot of people in my house. It's hard to distinguish like who's who. And he's like, well, let me tell you the story. It was about 7 years ago. I was new to Israel, and I heard that Sukkot in the old city was so beautiful. And I heard that Jews are so hospitable. So me and my friends were kind of just walking around, like waiting for this invite. We were waiting to get invited into a sukkah. We were so excited, except we were walking everywhere and we found nothing. And there was nowhere to go. We felt alone, and we felt like we were let down, and that what the people had said about the Jews and their hospitality was not true. And then you saw me and you told me and my friends, come on in. And you welcomed me into your sukkah, and you gave me drinks, and you fed me, and we sang and we played music. He said, I will never forget that night or that day. It changed my life, and it helped me come back in tshuva. So these stories are abundant. People who had said that my meals were life-changing. I'm not saying any of this to toot my own horn. I'm saying this to mention the grandeur when you're feeling lonely or alone, or you don't have a place to go, or you're low on money, or you just want to have the authentic Jewish experience because you know the Torah is so beautiful, but there's nowhere to go. It's killer, especially as a single person and everybody's going on with their family and going on with their life and going on with their children. And it's like they all have meals and somewhere to go and you're just sitting alone. It's killer. And I have been on that side of things. It sucks. And pardon my language, and not to get invited again and again, and then you see the same people at synagogue. It's heartbreaking. So yeah, I could completely understand from firsthand experience, both having been the lonely single person with nowhere to go and feeling like nobody loved me and I'm gonna have to celebrate the holidays alone again, to having tens and tens of guests literally say that these meals changed their life and they gave them a place called home. And being, like I said, and then being the guest and feeling that gratitude and watching people share with me. Hospitality is a really big deal in the Jewish community because Judaism really does not happen outside of communities. People who are coming back into Judaism or tradition, it's oftentimes extremely difficult for them to partake in all the different mitzvot if they're not near a community, because doing it alone, it's like heart-wrenching, it's gut-wrenching, it's terrible, frankly. So, and the miracles I saw with having Arabs and Muslims in my home that had never been in a Jewish home, or just the stories that were shared, I can only tell you that certainly welcoming people into your home really does bring the light of the beyond and the infinite into your home. Now, I will spin it the other way as well, but first I'm going to share with you the different ideas from Judaism. How do we know that hospitality is relevant? So first of all, we know our first big example, you might want to say Abraham, but I'm not going to say that. Our first big example is God. That God hosts all of us on this floating earth ball of water. And I learned from my teacher Mora Leah Golam, that God, he's called Hamakom. In Hebrew, Hamakom means the place or the space. Why? Because God makes a place for each and every one of us in his home, this planet, and in his heart. And the question is, if we want to imitate and emulate God Almighty, good God Almighty, right? That's one of my favorite songs. I hope they find me praising your name wherever they go, right? So this Hamakom, this God, he makes a space for us in his heart, in his world. And if we're going to emulate that, are we making a space and a place for others in our heart, in our attention, or maybe in a coffee date, or in our home? Because we know from our tradition that this is huge. So let's skip right to Abraham. We know that Abraham and Sarah, they had a tent that was open. Abraham and Sarah are our first matriarch and patriarch. And by the way, Abraham is also the Mac Daddy of the Abrahamic tradition. So also all of our Arab and Muslim cousins here, and many people around the Middle East that descended from Abraham, also really practice hospitality, and we'll just invite you in for a drink or water, whatever it is. So they had a tent that was open on all four sides so that everybody, all the wayfarers, everyone traveling through the desert really felt welcome. We also know the famous story that on the third day of Abraham's Brit Milah, his circumcision, it was like a heat wave, and he's literally in the most painful day, he ran out to greet the guests, and he is praised by this. We hear, we have two holidays, like I said, Sukkot, where we invite the famous Ushpizim, the holy guests, which are our ancestors in spirit. We're always inviting guests. We know on the holiday of Pesach, it begins in the Haggadah when Rav Huma had a meal. He would open the door wide and declare, "Whosoever is hungry, let that person come and eat," from the Gemara Ta'anit 20b. And like we say in the Haggadah, let all who are hungry come and eat. We learn from Masechet Gittin 57a, Kfar Bish, an evil village, was called so because they never gave hospitality to strangers. We even know about Sodom and Amorah, the famous Sodom and Gomorrah, these places that were so evil that if you were hospitable to people, they would literally kill you. And that was representative of the qualities of evil, people who closed their doors to strangers. And it just like, it goes on in Pirkei Avot and in many of the sources that hospitality to wayfarers is greater than welcoming the presence of the Shekhinah. We know this from the Gemara in Shabbos 127a, from the example I was telling you, that when Abraham was sitting outside of his tent, he was in communion with God, and he said, yo, God, hold on 1 second, there's guests. So we know that Judaism believes that inviting in strangers to your home or guests or wayfarers is even greater than being in communion with God. So like, boom, that's really big. Martin Buber, the famous modern philosopher, in Tales of Hasidim, the Later Masters, Volume 2, on page 31, says, a person who practices hospitality in the true sense of the word acquires the virtues of that person's guests. Like, that's a pretty big deal, I'd say. And I could list you the sources. They go on and on. Judaism is really all about the hospitality. Even in Birkat Hamazon, when we bless after the meal, there's this whole section from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi that says, may our host be very prosperous with all of his or her estates. May our host and their possessions be prosperous. May they be near a town. May the evil inclination not have power over them. And we pray for our host. So it's really quite a big deal. Not only that, Hillel, the famous Hillel, calls the soul a guest in our body, right? How does the body host our soul? So like, there's a lot of metaphors for God hosting us hosting our soul, us hosting guests, that being like the paradigm of what being a Jew means in a lot of ways. Even Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks quotes the famous line that a free man is one who shares his bread. Now, this line really, really inspired me when I was first coming into Tshuva. A free man is one who shares his bread. I was really profoundly touched by that, because when I'm hoarding, right? Let's say I have my little iced coffee over here and I'm hoarding my iced coffee. I don't need a blessing just for me. You want some? No. I am oppressed because I'm so consumed with my desire to have this all for me that I am no longer free. I am a slave to the millimeters of my coffee, right? You want another sip? No, 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 no. I'm a slave. I'm busy hoarding. A free man is one who shares his bread. And I have to tell you, to be honest, another personal story. In orchestra growing up, I had a friend. Her name was Nirit Gradwell. Credit to her, because I haven't spoken to her in probably 2 decades, but I'm still inspired by her till this day. She would come to orchestra. We were both on the violin. She was way better than me, probably till this day. And her parents would pack her these very generous snacks. She would have a whole stack of Pringles, and they would also give her $1 to go to the candy store in our temple, and she would get these gumballs. And I would sit there with her. We were best friends, and she would share with me equally. Like whatever she had, she would give me half of her burst. She'd just keep giving me Pringles, and she'd keep giving me gummy balls. And when I had a good snack, I wanted to make sure that it was all for me. And I was always mind blown at her ability to share it. She really did feel free. She felt like what Reb David Jonathan's, I keep mixing up his name because I love the Rabbi David Sacks, yet I'm talking about Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. May his aliyah have a neshama. May his neshama have an aliyah, who says a free man is one who shares his bread. So this is another take on Judaism, that Judaism isn't just about giving, right? We know that the word love, ahava, has at its root the Aramaic word hav, which means to give. We know that being like Abraham, or all of these ways that tradition encourages us to give, is a way of loving, and God is all about the love and the giving. And now we know that also Hachnasat Orchim, we also learned about the bringing the infinite light into your home, and the opportunities and the ways you can change life and the way you can care for your community. And now that a free man is one who shares his bread is really important, because the whole paradigm of Judaism is based on this idea that once we were slaves, that God saved us and made us free. And that freedom is an imperative part of our tradition. We talk about it every single day in the Shema, many times a day. We talk about it all throughout our prayers, leaving Egypt to become free. We talk about it in the Birkat Hamazon. We always talk about becoming free. So actually, part of Hachnasat Orchim is exercising this ability to trust God, to exercise freedom of generosity and sharing, that I shouldn't feel like I have to hoard all of my resources. Because what am I doing when I'm hoarding my resources? I'm basically not in the place of trust. You know, it's funny too, because even in Judaism, we have this idea, and I'm sorry, I don't know where it's from, that any money that you put into Shabbat comes back to you. So we don't even have to worry about the resource aspect. And yet still, many times, like, oh, should I buy the asparagus for Shabbat or not? You know, we're having 10 guests. That's a lot of asparagus. Asparagus in Israel is really expensive. It's like 25 shekel for like a bundle that small. That's like $7 for 7 asparaguses. You know, enjoy every single little bite of your asparagus there, because it's pricey. But you know, there's all this worry around it as well. And that's another interesting aspect of hospitality, is not just looking at the infinite light and the sharing is caring, and not making people feel like strangers, because we were once strangers, so bring them into your home. And the aspect of, you know, just all of this generosity and trusting God, and the sharing is saying, do I really trust God, that if I follow in his will, then I will be rewarded and I will be okay. So inviting guests is more than just making the lonely single people feel welcome, even though that's so huge and important. It's more than emulating God. It's an exercise in trusting God. And that's really what we're here to do in this world, is this whole life, as I learned from my friend Shingle Siskin, is secret tests of Emunah. This whole life, everything we're doing, all the mitzvot we're practicing, it's just exercises in, can I trust God? Can I give generously? Do I believe in the divine abundance, in the shefa, as we say? Or do I fear lack? So on the one hand, wow, hospitality is where it's at. It's divine, it's Kabbalistic, it's a practice in our own psychology of trust and in the abundance mindset, as opposed to the scarcity or lack mindset. You even, says Martin Buber, acquire the qualities of the people. And I'll share with you 2 more Torahs. They say also that the food is only as good as the guests, right? So that's a cute idea. And now I will share with you my favorite idea about hosting and being hosted, because I'm about to throw a curveball at you and start discussing some of the difficulties and the evil inclination traps of hosting, and why I feel like I truly deceived myself in all of that hosting. But before that, there's something that I came up with personally, and I hope one day they quote me on it. And that's like this, okay? So if you have experienced hospitality from an Orthodox family, I only say Orthodox because that's how the tradition goes. My sister and I were recently talking. My sister is an amazing, excellent educator in conservative Judaism, and I, let's say, lean more in Orthodox circles, although these are all just labels and who cares. But she was telling me how amazed she was at our community, that people will just take anybody in. If someone needs a place to stay, it doesn't matter if you know them, if you don't know them. You know, Chabad is a fantastic example of this. I have been literally all over the world. When I traveled from Ethiopia down to South Africa at one point by land, hitchhiking and by semi-trucks and native buses. And when I finally arrived from Mozambique into South Africa, I didn't know a soul in the country. And so I just went to the mall and I looked up Chabad's phone number and I called them and I said, I don't know anyone in the country. Can I come stay with you? And they were like, yeah, for sure. And it ended up changing my life, because they're the ones. I was heading to India after that Africa trip, and they were like, no, we think you should go to Israel and you should go study at this seminary. And they were so hospitable. They took me in. I was going to stay for one night because I was trying to buy a motorcycle to take it across South Africa, which thank God I did end up doing. It was a beautiful trip. How cool is that? but that buying of the motorcycle, even though I did end up buying it, every morning I'd wake up, she'd have coffee and teas and cakes, and I'd come back from an adventure and she'd have cheese toast ready for me, just like the care. And she took me to Kabbalah classes. That's where I began learning. I give credit to Rebbetzin Yafa Liberov of Johannesburg. So they changed, I literally changed my life with hospitality. So yeah, this all comes from the story that I was saying, that my sister was saying how amazing it is that when I say Orthodox or religious, I just mean because that's the people that are generally really aligned with the tradition of hosting. So it's so amazing that they'll just take anyone into their home. And I have both had the privilege to do that, and I have been the person staying in random people's homes all over the world who literally did not know me and just opened their house like I was family. So another point of Achnasat Orchim is it really reiterates this idea that we are all one big family. And that is essential because every day we say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that God is one. Well, if God is one, we are one as well. We are one big family. We are brothers and sisters. And that's why amongst my holy hippie friends, we always call each other brother or sister. Thank you, brother. Thank you, sister. Hey, sister, could I please have this? Because we want to keep in our consciousness this idea that we are all one. And Achnasat Orchim really helps us recall this extremely important fundamental notion that not just the Jewish people are one, but every single person walking on this planet, we are one big family of Adam and Eve. And that's, so you could see how just taking the topic of Achnasat Orchim, it's mind-bending, it's mind-altering, it reinforces so many of the fundamentals. And here's the Torah I wanted to share that I told you that I came up with, and I hope they do quote it one day. When I was touched by the generosity of the people around me. So I thought, what if at some point your friend calls you and says, hey, I want to take you out for dinner. You're like, oh, that's so sweet. Yeah, my treat. Oh, thank you so much. Like, I'd love to go, So now imagine that your friend takes you out for dinner and and they're like, you know what? Let's party. Let's get wine. And you're like, really? Okay. And then they order a bottle of red wine and they're like, let's try the rosé also. And they order pink. And then let's try the white also. And so now you have 3 bottles of wine and you're like, wow, this is so generous. They're like, oh, by the way, if you want any shots of anything, feel free, or here's a beer too, if you feel like it. And while we're at it, let's get some cola, some bubbly water, some mineral water. Thanks. Okay, cool. You know what? I'm really in the mood for some house bread. I hear the bread here is delicious. And then they order like 2 different types of bread. And you're like blushing, like, what did I do to deserve this? Like, why are you being so nice to me? And they're like, I'm in the mood. Let's get appetizers. But let's not just get one appetizer. Let's get like 6 appetizers. Let's get the hummus, the mapucha, the special pickles and olives. Let's get the Chinese salad. Let's get the Italian salad while we're at it. Oh, did you try their tahina? And they just start ordering all these appetizer dips to go with the house bread. And it's like, can you imagine what you would feel like at that meal? And they're like, all right, we have to order main course. And then they order 5. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm blown away by your generosity. This is just unbelievable. And they're like, it's not over. We have to get dessert. Oh, and tea also. I believe if that happened to you, if your friend told you that they want to take you out and they ordered that generously, you would not forget that meal for the rest of your life. And that's what we do for each other every single Shabbat all around the world. And so every time I am invited out, I really try to recall this idea and then share it at the table also, because it's not even, I'd say it's even more generous than at a restaurant, because the people hosting you, they cleaned their house, they went shopping, they schlepped the groceries, especially in Israel. You don't just get in your car. A lot of times you're literally schlepping it down the side of the street in the boiling heat, and you're sweating, and and then you cooked and you spent all that time and you put blessings into it. And I always pray over my food energetically, and then they cleaned it. So like, wow, I think this is very, very important, especially in a culture where hospitality has become the norm. It's often easy for guests just to show up and eat the food and say thanks and bounce. And I think it's very, very important that we recall the tremendous effort and love offering that is hosting. So that's my favorite Torah. And in terms of hosting, just having that idea in my if someone ever took me out for dinner like that, I would for sure remember it for the rest of my life, for sure, not even a question. Okay, and yet again, like we said, this happens every week for us. And now I want to throw the curveball. The curveball is, I called this lesson hospitality, to be or not to be, because I do believe that sometimes being hospitable is the work of the Yetzer Hara, of the evil side, of the dark side, and actually the worst thing that any of us can do for ourselves. Why, you say? Well, first of all, I'll just admit my own shortcomings, and that I know that many times when I was hosting, a lot of it was attached to ego. How great people thought my food was, how wonderful and capable I must have been as the smiling host, how beautiful my home looked with the flowers that I meticulously put on my table, sometimes while being grumpy or even mean to my partner in the stress of getting it all ready. A lot of times families I did not have children when I was hosting, but a lot of times families can neglect their own children. The children need more attention and more personal time. And instead, the families are so busy preparing hachnasat orchim that they're practicing neglect of their own children. And I would say even worse than that, because it all begins at home, is what I was doing for many years, which was neglecting or just not being aware of my own needs. And I've had a big change in my own mental headspace around hosting. I would say this year I hosted about 3 meals because I was really happy to do it. And I was doing it for God and the community. Whereas before I was doing it because Judaism said it was good, and I forgot to consider the most important person in my life, and that's me. And I don't say that with arrogance, God forbid, or with ego. I personally believe, psychologically speaking, that the healthiest people are the ones that put themselves first. Now, I don't mean selfishly, I mean self-fully. And that is also why I believe that while hachnasat orchim, hospitality, is one of the most beautiful things we can do if it's done healthfully, it is one of the most destructive things we can do in terms of denying ourselves our own needs, or in terms of not listening in intuitively to what is good and healthy for us. And hopefully you'll tune in. We have another class in Torah psychology about the intuition. But so many times, my partner, no blame on him, would ask, oh, can we have X, Y, and Z people? And everything in my gut was like, no, I don't want. But then, because this idea in Judaism that you should like push yourself and go out of your comfort zone, I would like pray on it and take a few deep breaths and say, fine, I can handle it. But here's why that's messed up. Because I wasn't respecting myself. And the true mitzvah, the true service of God, is always checking in with yourself to see if this is good for you. Because if it is not good for you, then who are you deceiving? My real test all of those years, I don't think was about taking more people and more people into my house. My test that I missed until recently is how to practice borders and boundaries. How to know when to put myself and my own needs first, how to put myself and my partner first, how to take space and time. And not only that, because think about this. Do you want to be the guest in someone's home that really doesn't want to have you, but's just doing it to be a good Jew? Oh my gosh, I would be mortified, terrified, and embarrassed to find out that someone took me into their house when they were feeling tired or exhausted or just not into it, just for the sake of a mitzvah. Please, don't make me a mitzvah, and please don't make other people your mitzvah. So what I think is so important about hachnasat orchim is, like I said, it's like an archetype for the psychology of looking at the mitzvahs and seeing what is the true mitzvah for you. Is the true mitzvah to get more strict, to be more connected to the letter of the law, to take in more people? Is that your true mitzvah? Because for a lot of people, it is. Or is the mitzvah to be a bit more lenient, to say no, to put yourself first, to practice borders and boundaries? because we have to look at God in the circumstances of our lives. As we know, ve'ahavta lere'echa kamocha, we must love our neighbors as ourselves. And if I'm throwing myself in the trash, or I'm just taking people in against my intuition, or when it does not feel right for me, I am not doing a mitzvah. I am deceiving myself. A lot of women, I'm sorry, not to say men as well, but women end up taking the brunt of the hosting a lot of times. And if you're a man that takes the brunt of the hosting, this is for you. But I do believe that part of this shiur, this lesson, this talk in Torah and psychology about hospitality is also making sure that we aren't falling into what is called broken kindness. Chesed that is out of whack, or for a more psychological term, martyrdom, where I become the doormat or the shmata in order to serve God. Think about it. God loves you so much. You're his precious daughter or his precious son. Does God say, hey, make yourself a doormat and put your needs second to do my mitzvahs? A loving parent would never want that of their children. If a loving parent heard that their kid was hosting when they really didn't feel like it, or it made them uncomfortable, or they didn't want to take in more people, that parent would be like, sweetie, don't do that to yourself. Don't do that. It's not a favor to you or to them. But a lot of times, what has happened in our culture is that we have preached kindness so much that we have forgotten that kindness begins at home. Midot, character traits like chesed or gevura, like kindness or discipline. Midot are measurements because it's on a scale, it's on a spectrum. Sometimes if I am being kind to others, I am being cruel to myself. And of course, vice versa as well. But I really want in this talk to bring up the psychology of giving and hosting within Judaism and just pose the question to you. Maybe you're not like me. Maybe you love hosting. Maybe it's great for you. And then you can check your balances. Or maybe you're one of those people that, like me, was giving my all to others without considering myself. And this is what's called broken kindness. Rabbi David Foreman brings an example of this in the case of Lot, Abraham's nephew, who lived in Sodom. And when the angels came to his house, he wanted to host them so badly because he learned from Abraham that hospitality is so important that even when an angry mob came to his home to try to get at his guests, do you know what Lot did? He said, because in Sodom, people were interested in sexualizing all of their guests. They would rape all of their guests. And so when the people of Sodom heard that Lot had guests, they wanted to come rape them. And Lot was practicing broken kindness. And he said, don't hurt my guests. Here, take my virgin daughters and do with them as you wish. Now, I am not making this up. This is pshat. This is simple text from the Bible. I'm sorry I don't have the source. Oh, I do. It's in Genesis chapter 19, I believe. He gives his virgin daughters away and says, do what you want with them because I have to protect my guests. Now, you might say, whoa, that's disgusting and crazy. And yes, it is hyperbole. It is an exaggerated story that none of us are going to send out our children to be raped to protect our guests. But on the smaller level, we put ourselves in the way of harm and our family in the way of harm if our hosting is not checked and balanced. And again, it's not just about hosting. It is also about all of the mitzvahs we do. Of course, we have to follow Hashem and the Torah. Of course, we want to keep the mitzvahs. But within every mitzvah, once you get to a certain level of keeping the mitzvahs, then you have to mature. We don't have to do anything. But at least in my journey, what I'm realizing is I have to mature and then take a moment of consciousness and awareness and see hospitality, to be or not to be, different levels of tzedakah or chesed, to be or not to be. Is my chesed balanced and loving first towards myself? Is it too much towards myself and I don't want to share? Or is it too much oriented towards other people and then I end up practicing neglect and martyrdom of myself? So I find this topic so very interesting because this is, even we have in Proverbs, in Mishle in 18:24, and this is brought down in Brachot 63a from the Gemara. Rabbi says, people should not invite too many friends to their house, as it is written, there are friends that people have to their own hurt. So we actually even have sources that tell us to balance it. I just personally believe, and feel free to disagree with me, that in our culture today, we have negated the idea of balance and have pushed so heavily upon the returning Jew or the practicing Jew, give, 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 give. And then we have broken down women, broken down husbands, broken families, inner couple fighting, and deception of the guests when maybe you don't want them there and you're having them anyways. Ouch, all is seen in heaven. What happens when that's going to be revealed? So, like I said, hospitality is an incredibly important topic to discuss because it's in our weekly lives. But hospitality is not just to be or not to be. It is a model for looking at all of the psychology around the mitzvot and the practices and the kindness we do, and assessing, is my kindness coming from a whole place, from a balanced place, from a place where I checked in on myself first, so then I can give my love? Or is it coming from a not conscious place where I'm just like, Judaism said it's good, do it, just do it, just do it, just give. You're going to change people's lives. It's going to be good for them. It's going to look good. People are going to admire you. You'll give it. Where is my kindness coming from? Where are all my mitzvot coming from? And have I checked in with myself first to see if this is healthy for me and my family? Because it's a trick. God also sends the evil inclination onto the mitzvahs. We don't just get to freely do mitzvahs, and the second you're involved in a mitzvah, you're good. No, as sophisticated are your mitzvahs and your kindnesses, is just as sophisticated as the Yetzer Hara that's going to come try to attack you and trick you. And my Yetzer Hara was tricking me for many, many years to think, just keep pushing, just keep doing, just keep giving. And in my case, while it was lovely and I don't regret it, I can't say I wish I would have had the knowledge before, but I'm so glad that my eyes were opened, and now I am putting up boundaries and borders for myself and honoring myself. Because when I truly honor myself and my own practice of mitzvahs, then and only then can I truly honor you and your practice of your mitzvahs. Because I think we would prefer a world where everybody was giving from a place of goodness. Now, listen, it doesn't mean don't push yourself. Yesterday, a friend was in town and her parents were here, and I really needed to do work, but I saw them and there was a heat wave, and I saw that it was the right thing to do, let's say, to invite them in. And even though I wanted to do work, I could stretch myself a little, and I invited them in for some ice water and for some air conditioning, and I saw that it really refreshed them. So yeah, I lost that hour of time, but I didn't do it resentfully. And it was still a kindness where I could push myself a little bit without betraying myself. So yes, Judaism encourages pushing, but only where it's not going to be resentful. Wherever we do something we don't want to do, we pay the price in resentment. And that's not healthy for anyone. So in summary, let's just go back. I hope I can remember all the things and find them in all my notes. Hachnasat orchim, hospitality, is major in our tradition. There's many sources about it. We learn it out from God. We learn it from the body and the soul. We learn it out from Abraham and Sarah. We learn it out from the Gemara and from Rav Huna and from Rabbi Sheba and Bar Yochai and from Yehuda Hanassi. We learn about how beautiful it is to host because it teaches us that we are one. It teaches us to trust in God. It teaches us that we're all a family. It teaches us to practice sharing so that we are free because of the paradigm that we were, like breaking out of slave mentality, that a free man is one who shares his bread. It reminds us that we were once strangers, and to include people and to build community and to give of ourselves, and all of these beautiful, beautiful practices. It's beautiful for a lot of reasons, and it brings the light of the divine into our home. And curveball, the question that I believe what I'm trying to say here is about hosting and other mitzvot, to first check in with ourselves, with our own minds and our own hearts and our own souls. Because if we're giving where we don't want to be giving, and there's going to be resentment, or we're going to pay a price that's too heavy, this is broken kindness. This is what Lot did. and it's just a trick from the other side. That even our Torah and our mitzvot have to be checked and balanced to making sure we're doing it for God, which includes doing it with respect for ourselves and our own families first, and not to just continue this, what I judge as an unhealthy culture of giving in martyrdom and just giving just endless kindness, when in fact that is not measured and that is not balanced. And I bless us all with all of our mitzvot, especially in Hachnasat Orchim, to just take this moment and assess our lives and see where we are on the scale. Do I need to be giving more? And maybe I've been stingy about my resources and not trusting God, and I really can invite people in, and I can open my home, and I can call that person in the community who's maybe not so cool? Or do I need to be pulling back and putting more energy into myself and my children? Only you will know where you are placed on that scale. And I bless you with clarity, and I bless you that doing the work on this mitzvah should transfer out into your other mitzvahs. And thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of Torah and Psychology. Cool. Peace in, homies. God bless.